Iran-Israel-U.S. war escalates. On day 25, Trump claims productive talks and postpones strikes on Iranian power plants, but Tehran dismisses it as fake news. Fresh Iranian missile waves hit Tel Aviv, damaging buildings and injuring 6. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East, now entering its 4th week since the United States and Israel launched coordinated military operations against Iran on the 28th of February 2026, saw a mix of military escalation and conflicting diplomatic signals on Tuesday. U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 5-day postponement of planned strikes on Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure, citing very good and productive conversations with Iranian representatives that allegedly produced 15 points of agreement. However, Iranian officials, including Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, categorically rejected the claims as fake news designed to manipulate oil markets and buy time for U.S.-Israeli forces. Meanwhile, Iran fired multiple waves of missiles toward Israel, triggering sirens across Tel Aviv and southern cities, with direct impacts causing building damage and light injuries. This comprehensive report compiles the latest developments from major international news outlets, providing an in-depth analysis of the military actions, diplomatic contradictions, humanitarian toll, economic fallout, and regional repercussions as of the 24th of March, 2026. Background and timeline of the conflict. The war erupted on the 28th of February 2026 when U.S. and Israeli forces initiated large-scale airstrikes and missile attacks on Iranian targets. According to U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, more than 9,000 strikes have been conducted on Iranian territory to date, targeting missile production facilities, drone manufacturing sites, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, intelligence headquarters, naval vessels, and air defense systems. Over 140 Iranian naval vessels have been damaged or sunk. Iran responded by effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz, a critical choke point through which approximately 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas, LNG, transits and launching retaliatory missile and drone barrages against Israel, U.S. allies in the Gulf, and other targets. The conflict has rapidly expanded, drawing in Hezbollah in Lebanon and raising fears of a broader regional war. By March 24, the fighting showed no signs of abating despite Trump's diplomatic overtures. Israeli forces continued strikes on Tehran and southern Lebanon, while Iran maintained pressure with fresh missile launches. Trump's diplomatic claims and the postponement of strikes. In a series of posts on Truth Social late Monday and early Tuesday, President Trump declared that very strong talks had taken place over the weekend, facilitated by his son-in-law Jared Kushner and envoy Steve Witkoff. He claimed the discussions involved a top person in Iran described as the most respected leader, not the supreme leader, and resulted in major points of agreement, including Iran's commitment not to pursue nuclear weapons and to stop threatening the United States. Trump specifically postponed his earlier 8-hour ultimatum for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, extending the deadline by 5 days until Friday. He instructed the Department of War, Pentagon, to hold off on any attacks against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure during this period. Based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed and constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week, I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, Trump wrote. He added that there was a very good chance we're going to end up in a deal and that Iran means business this time. Trump also mentioned that Operation Epic Fury had significantly degraded Iran's capabilities, leaving the country in a position where it was no longer an immediate threat to America. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, after speaking with Trump, echoed a cautious optimism, stating that military gains could be leveraged into an agreement that safeguards Israel's vital interests. However, Netanyahu emphasized that Israeli attacks on Iran and Hezbollah targets in Lebanon won't stop and that there's more to come. Iran's firm rejection, fake news and psychological operations. Tehran swiftly and unequivocally dismissed Trump's assertions. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, a hardliner and former Air Force pilot, posted on social media, "No negotiations have been held with the U.S. and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the U.S. and Israel are trapped. The Iranian Foreign Ministry stated there was no dialogue between Tehran and Washington. While some Iranian officials acknowledged receiving messages through mediators, including possibly Oman, Egypt, Pakistan, and Gulf states, they insisted these were under review and did not constitute direct negotiations. The IRGC described Trump's statements as worn-out psychological operations from a deceitful American president that would not distract Iran from the battlefield. A senior Iranian military advisor to the supreme leader warned that the war would continue until full compensation for damages was received. IRGC officer Mohsen Rezai threatened to paralyze the U.S., sink its vessels in the Arabian Gulf, and target infrastructure in Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC countries, if power plants or other critical sites were attacked. Despite the denials, reports indicated indirect communications with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi engaging preliminarily with U.S. envoys and discussions potentially hosted in Islamabad involving U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. Military developments on March 24, missile barrages and counterstrikes. Early Tuesday morning, sirens blared in southern Israeli cities, including Beersheva and Arad, as well as central areas around Tel Aviv. Iran launched several waves of missiles, with at least 4 impact sites reported in Tel Aviv. A multi-story apartment building suffered severe damage, gaping holes torn through its facade, and several cars were set ablaze on a crowded street. Israel's Magen David Adom Emergency Service reported 6 people lightly wounded. Search and rescue teams operated at the sites, with police isolating impact zones. Debris from intercepted projectiles fell in areas including Rosh Hayin and near Palestinian towns in the occupied West Bank. Additional impacts were noted near Haifa, a cluster missile in Nesher with no injuries, and in northern Israel. Hezbollah from Lebanon also fired rockets, triggering sirens in Acre and suburbs of Haifa, though most were intercepted. In response, the Israeli military conducted overnight airstrikes on more than 50 targets in central Tehran, including IRGC intelligence headquarters, the Iranian Intelligence Ministry, ballistic missile storage facilities, weapon sites, and air defense systems. Israeli jets also struck Hezbollah infrastructure in Beirut and southern Lebanon, including bridges and fuel stations accused of supporting militant activities. One strike in Bahamun near Beirut killed at least 2 and wounded 5. In the Gulf region, sirens sounded in Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE due to Iranian missile and drone threats. Kuwait's army intercepted projectiles, but debris damaged 7 power lines, causing outages. Saudi Arabia reported destroying over 20 drones. Bahrain reported a fire at a facility from what it called criminal Iranian aggression. Israeli jets also struck Hezbollah infrastructure in Beirut and southern Lebanon, including bridges and fuel stations accused of supporting militant activities. One strike in Bahamun near Beirut killed at least 2 and wounded 5. In the Gulf region, sirens sounded in Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE due to Iranian missile and drone threats. Kuwait's army intercepted projectiles, but debris damaged 7 power lines, causing outages. Saudi Arabia reported destroying over 20 drones. Bahrain reported a fire at a facility from what it called criminal Iranian aggression. U.S. forces continued operations, with CENTCOM confirming ongoing strikes on Iranian military targets. No new ground troop deployments were announced, though preparations for potential operations such as seizing Karg Island have been discussed. Humanitarian toll and casualties. The human cost of the conflict has been staggering. Rights groups and officials report the following approximate figures since February 28. Iran, over 1,500 to more than 3,200 killed, including at least 214 children, with 18,551 injured. Recent strikes in Tabriz killed 6 and injured 9. A child was rescued from rubble in Tehran after an Israeli strike on a residential building. Lebanon, at least 1,000 to 1,039 killed, including over 100 children, 2,583 injured. Additional deaths from strikes in Beirut and southern areas. Israel, 15 to 18 killed, 4,697 to 4,829 injured, 111 hospitalized, 12 inches serious condition. 6 lightly injured in the latest Tel Aviv attack. United States, 13 service members killed, around 200 injured. Gulf countries, Kuwait, at least 6 killed, Bahrain, 2 killed, UAE, 8 killed, 161 injured, Qatar, 16 injured, Oman, 3 killed, Saudi Arabia, 2 killed, Jordan, 28 injured. Iraq, at least 61 killed, including PMF fighters in a U.S. strike in Anbar province. Other, dozens more across Syria, Palestine, and elsewhere. The International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC president, warned that attacks on essential infrastructure amount to war on civilians and risk irreversible consequences. Economic and oil market impact. While the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and attacks on energy infrastructure have triggered a global energy crisis described by International Energy Agency head Fatih Birol as worse than the 1970s oil shocks combined with the Russia-Ukraine gas disruptions. Global oil supply has dropped by about 11 million barrels per day, roughly 10% loss, with additional impacts on LNG from Qatar, 17% export capacity offline, potentially for up to 5 years. Oil prices fluctuated wildly. Brent crude fell over 10% to below $100 per barrel after Trump's announcement, but rebounded above $104 amid Iran's denials. U.S. crude rose similarly. Asian stock markets initially rallied but remained volatile. Countries across Asia implemented emergency measures. Japan began releasing oil from reserves. South Korea launched energy-saving campaigns and supplementary budgets. China adjusted domestic fuel prices upward but capped hikes to cushion consumers. New Zealand offered subsidies to low-income families. Sri Lanka declared weekly public holidays for government offices. Analysts warned of prolonged disruptions to shipping, with rerouting via the Red Sea, increasing cargo volumes at ports like Jeddah by 50%. Regional and international reactions. Gulf nations remained on high alert, with interconnected power and desalination grids vulnerable. Oman facilitated consultations on the Strait. Pakistan expressed willingness to host talks in Islamabad. The European Union expressed deep concern and called for negotiations, while Australia condemned Iran's actions and supported UAE defenses. Britain prioritized a nuclear agreement and prepared for economic fallout. The conflict has also strained relations in Iraq, where a U.S. strike killed PMF members and raised fears of wider involvement. Outlook and analysis. As of the 24th of March 2026, the situation remains highly fluid and fragile. Trump's 5-day window offers a slim opportunity for de-escalation through indirect channels, but deep contradictions between U.S., Israeli claims, and Iranian rejections, combined with ongoing missile exchanges, suggest the path to peace is uncertain. Military operations continue unabated outside energy infrastructure, and the humanitarian and economic toll mounts daily. Analysts note that while talks may be occurring behind the scenes via mediators, the psychological operations accusations highlight a trust deficit that could undermine any agreement. The war's impact on global energy security underscores the urgent need for diplomacy, yet both sides appear determined to press their advantages on the battlefield.